Please subscribe, like, and share. It really helps us out. And of course, if you have any questions, comment below, and we will answer you as soon as we can. Welcome to this video in our series on A-level economics. Topics covered today are as follows. 2.1. Measures of economic performance. This is part 2 of 2. If you haven't seen our previous videos, click on the card above.
Next, let's talk about inflation. To start with, let's look at some definitions. Firstly, inflation is the general increase of prices in the economy which erodes the purchasing power of money. Low inflation is generally considered to be better than high inflation. Secondly, deflation is the fall of prices and indicates a slowdown in the rate of growth of output in the economy. Lastly, disinflation is a reduction in the rate of inflation, i.e., prices are still rising but they are not rising by as much. You may be required to do some simple calculations. These are maths questions based on inflation, and are similar to GCSE level percentage questions. For example, if the level of inflation is 10%, what will £500 worth of goods in year 1 cost in year 2? This can be calculated by 110% by 500, which gives £550. Another example would be, if the level of inflation is 50%, what will £1,000 worth of goods in year 2 in year 1? To answer this, we would have to divide 1,000 by 150 and then multiply it by 100. 150 is 100% plus the rate of inflation of 50%. We multiply by 100 to get rid of the percent, giving us an answer of £666.67. That brings us to indices. Nominal figures must be changed into real figures to make comparisons. This is done by choosing 1 year for the base year and adjusting all other figures into equivalent figures. In Britain, the most well-known indices are the Retail Price Index, or RPI, and the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. The base figure is given an index figure of 100, and all the figures before or after that time are then compared to that figure. To calculate, we use this equation. New figure divided by the base figure multiplied by 100. This table shows an example of the calculation. It is downloadable by a link in the description below.
Firstly, let's look at the Consumer's Price Index. The Office for National Statistics collects prices on 710 goods and services from 20,000 shops in 141 locations and online sites, and the prices are updated every month, with collectors visiting the same retailers to monitor identical goods. New items are added to the list every year, such as microwavable rice and nail varnish, whilst others are taken away, including organic carrots. All these prices are combined using the information on the average household spending pattern to produce an overall price index. The average household spending is worked out through the Living Costs and Food Survey, where around 5,500 families keep diaries of what they spend over a fortnight. It takes into account how much is spent on each item, so they are weighted. For example, we spend more on petrol than on postage stamps, so an increase in petrol will have a bigger impact on the overall rate of inflation.
So, what are the limitations of CPI? It is impossible for the figure to take into account every single good that is sold in the country, and so therefore the CPI is not totally representative. Similarly, different households spend different amounts on each good, and so therefore the CPI only measures an average rate of inflation, and is not totally representative. Moreover, it does not include the price of housing, and so, since this has tended to rise more than the price of other goods, the data may be lower than it should be. Since the figure are more recent than RPI, it is difficult to make comparisons with historical data. It has only been used since 1996, with estimates going back to 1988, which means that levels of inflation using CPI can only be accurately compared back to then. Some people argue that all inflation indices overestimate inflation because they don't take into account the fact that goods and services have improved in quality, and so will obviously be more expensive. For example, A car in the 1950s would be far less comfortable and reliable than today. It has no way of indicating the change of goods that are bought.
What about the retail price index? The RPI is very similar to the CPI. However, there are some differences between the data included and the way it is calculated. 1. RPI includes housing costs such as mortgage and interest payments and council tax, whereas CPI does not. 2. CPI takes into account the fact that when prices rise, people will switch to a product that has gone up by less. Therefore, the CPI is generally lower than the RPI. 3. RPI excludes the top 4% of income earners and low-income pensioners as they are not average households, whilst CPI covers all households and all incomes. RPI is no longer considered as the best method and has had its national statistics status removed, although the Office for National Statistics still calculates it every month.
What are the causes of inflation? Firstly, demand pull inflation. Prices in a market are determined by demand and supply, and a shift in either will cause the price to change. Inflation can therefore be caused by an increase in aggregate demand. This is the total demand for goods and services in the economy. If any factor which increases aggregate demand was to increase, studied more in Unit 2.2, then inflation would increase. Secondly, cost push inflation. Whilst an increase in aggregate demand can push prices up, a decrease in aggregate supply may also push prices up. When businesses find their costs have risen, they will put up prices to maintain their profit margins. This can be caused by any factor which decreases aggregate supply, studied more in Unit 2.3. Next, a growth of the money supply. Another potential cause of inflation is there is too much money in the economy. If people have access to money, they will want to spend it, but if there is no increase in the number of goods and services supplied, then prices will have to rise. This idea grew out of the Fisher equation. This M multiplied by V is equal to P multiplied by T. This is where M is the money supply, V is the speed of money circulating in the economy, P is the price level, and T is the number of transactions. An increase in money supply will lead to an increase in the price level, ceteris paribus. Lastly, the government can also increase the amount of money that they print, and decisions to increase government borrowing can also increase the money supply. The money supply can be increased by banks creating credit, known as the bank multiplier. Banks make their money by taking in our deposits and then lending money out at interest rates. They lend money and keep a certain percentage, and the people who borrow money do so in order to spend it. The person who receives the money the borrower has spent is likely to input it back into the banking system, where the bank sees it as a new deposit, and a percentage of this deposit is then lent out.
What are the effects of inflation? Let's look at the agents in the economy to see the effect. Firstly, consumers. If people's incomes do not rise with inflation, then they will have less to spend, which could cause a fall in living standards. Those who are in debt will be able to pay it off at a price that is of cheaper value, but those who are owed money lose because the money they get back is of cheaper value. Consumers who have saved will lose out as their money is worth less. Inflation has psychological effects on consumers. Because prices are rising, they may feel less well off, even if their income is rising in line with inflation, and so this may cause them to decrease their spending. Secondly, let's look at firms. If inflation in Britain is higher than in other countries, British goods will be more expensive. They will become less competitive and make them more difficult to export. This will also affect the balance of payments. Deflation isn't good, as it encourages people to postpone their purchases as they wait for the price to fall further. People will be more likely to save as the value of their money will rise in the future, and they will be prevented from borrowing as deflation means the real value of their debt increases. This can lead to a fall in demand for goods, leading to a fall in firms' profit, and in business confidence, which can lead to a long-term reluctance to invest. In general, inflation, deflation, and disinflation are difficult to predict, and so this means that firms cannot plan for the future. Another effect of changing prices is that firms will have to calculate new prices, then change their menus and labeling. This can be expensive. Thirdly, governments. If the government fails to change excise taxes, which are taxes that are set at a certain amount, in line with inflation, then real government revenue will fall. However, if they fail to change personal income tax allowances, the amount a worker can earn tax-free, then real government income will increase and taxpayers will have less money. Finally, workers. If workers do not receive yearly pay rises at the rate of inflation, they will be worse off and their living standard will decrease. Those in weaker unions tend to be most affected as they are unable to win wage rises in line with inflation. Deflation could cause some staff to lose their jobs as there is a lack of demand, meaning firms see a fall in profit and have to decrease staff to cut costs. Some of these costs can be reduced if inflation is anticipated, which will allow groups to plan for the future. This can be done through indexation, so wages or taxes are increased in line with inflation. An example of this is workers negotiating with employers for wage rises in line with the predicted CPI or RPI. However, indexation may in itself further inflation because wage increases will reflect past increases. Therefore, if inflation has been at 10% previously but the government wants to reduce it to 2%, this will be difficult if workers are still getting a 10% pay rise due to indexation agreements.
Now, let's look at employment and unemployment. Unemployment represents a waste of resources, and so the level of unemployment is a good indicator of a country's economy. Employment tends to be linked to economic growth, as fast economic growth will lead to more jobs being created. The level of unemployment can be stated as a number or as a percentage of the population of working age. What are the measures of unemployment? Firstly, the claimant count. The claimant count is the number of people receiving benefits for being unemployed. It provides the number of claimants on a particular day each month and the numbers joining and leaving the count each month. Next, the International Labour Organization and UK Labour Force Survey. The Office of National Statistics uses the International Labour Organization, or ILO, definition of unemployment and employed. Through the ILO, anyone over 16 can be classed as employed, unemployed or economically inactive. 1. Employed. Those who do more than 1 hour of paid work a week or are temporarily away from work, for example, on holiday, are on a government-supported training scheme or do a minimum of 15 hours of unpaid work for their family business. 2. Unemployed. Those of working age who are without work, able to work and seeking work and have actively sought work in the last 4 weeks and are available to start work in the next 2 weeks. 3. Inactive. Those who are neither employed nor unemployed. They are people of working age not seeking employment as well as those seeking employment but not able to start work, for example, those in study, looking after family, they have health-related issues, are discouraged workers or those who are fed up of applying, retirement and those who do not want or need a job. The Labor Force Survey is a sample of people living in households and is a legal requirement for every country in the EU. It asks questions about personal circumstances and activity in the labor market to class people as employed, unemployed or inactive by the ILO definitions. The figures are only an estimate of the true level of unemployment as it is measured by a sample.
What are the comparisons between the claimant count and LFS? 1. Some people may not be included in the LFS unemployment measure but would be in the claimant count. These may include people working in the hidden economy or those who fraudulently claim benefits. 2. However, some people aren't eligible for benefits but are classed as unemployed so would appear in the LFS but not the claimant count. This can be if their partner is working, if they are looking for work along with full-time study or if they are around state pension age. The LFS tends to be higher than the claimant count because of these reasons. 3. Sometimes, the claimant count and LFS rates can be going in different directions. This could be due to the fact that the LFS is only a sample and different types of people have been asked, which can lead to short-term changes in the rate. Also, there may be things happening in the labor market not covered by the claimant count. For example, more students could look for work along their studies or more people above state pension age may look for work. It is argued that both measures underestimate the figure as they do not include the following. People working part-time but would like to work full-time. Those on government training schemes who would prefer employment. People classed as sick or disabled. Those who aren't actively looking for jobs but would take a job if offered or are in education because they can't get a job. These are the hidden unemployed. Now let's look at the rates of employment. The economically active are the employed and unemployed. They are engaged in the labor market and are people employers can look to recruit. The workless are the unemployed and inactive. The employment rate is the percentage of the population of working age who are employed, and the unemployment rate is the percentage of the economically active who are unemployed. The activity or participation rate is the percentage of the population of working age who are economically active, whilst the inactivity rate is the percentage of the population of working age who are inactive.
How about underemployment? The underemployed are those who are in part-time or zero-hour contracts when they would prefer to be full-time, and people who are self-employed but would rather be employees. It also includes those who are in jobs that do not reflect their skill level, for example, a university graduate that can't find a graduate job so is working as a bartender. The underemployed aren't included in any unemployment statistics. Underemployment tends to increase during recessions because firms will just reduce staff hours instead of making them redundant and having to pay expensive redundancy packages. It doesn't have as many negative effects as official unemployment, but it does mean the underemployed have lower incomes and so will spend less, reducing aggregate demand and growth of the economy. What is the significance of changes in activity? Increases in inactivity will decrease the size of the labor force, therefore causing a fall in the productive potential of the country. There will be a lower GDP and lower tax revenues as fewer people are working. However, decreases in inactivity could just result in more people being unemployed if there are no jobs available to them.
What are the different types of unemployment? Firstly, frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is due to people moving between jobs. This could be due to new workers entering the labor market or people who have chosen to leave their previous job. These people may take a while to locate and gain a job that they are willing to accept. This isn't a serious problem as it is only short term. Secondly, structural unemployment. This is a much more serious form of unemployment as it is a long-term decline in demand in an industry leading to a reduction in employment, perhaps because of increasing international competition or technology. It is where the demand for labor is lower than the supply in an individual labor market, for example, shipbuilding. The lack of geographical and occupational mobility means that people will remain unemployed, so need to be retrained in order to gain a job. There are different types of structural unemployment. 1. Regional unemployment is where certain areas of a country suffer from very low levels of employment due to industry closures. This is made even worse by the fact that the loss of jobs can mean a fall in demand for other businesses in the area, forcing more closures and job losses. 2. Sectoral unemployment is where one sector, primary, secondary and tertiary, suffers a dramatic fall in employment. 3. Technological unemployment is where an improvement in technology means that jobs are replaced. Thirdly, seasonal unemployment. Some employment is strongly seasonal in demand. Industries such as tourism are only prominent during certain times of the year, so only demand large numbers of workers at a specific time. Once that time of the year has passed, then the labor force is drastically reduced. There is little that can be done to prevent this from occurring in a free market economy.
Next, cyclical unemployment. This is unemployment due to a general lack of demand for goods and services within the country. This is also known as Keynesian demand-deficient unemployment. When there is a recession or severe slowdown in economic growth, we see rising unemployment because of plant closures, business failures, and an increase in worker layoffs and redundancies. This is due to a decrease in demand causing businesses to cut employment in order to control costs and restore some of their profitability. Now, real wage inflexibility. This is unemployment considered to be the result of real wages being above their market clearing level, leading to an excess supply of labor. Some workers might be prepared to work for less than the minimum wage, and companies may be prepared to take on more workers if they could pay them less than the minimum wage, but this is illegal and so unemployed workers cannot get a job. Some economists believe that the minimum wage risks creating unemployment in industries where international competition from low labor cost producers is severe. As yet, there is relatively little evidence that the minimum wage has created rising unemployment on the scale that was feared. It can also be caused by unemployed workers refusing to take low-paid jobs because they can receive more in welfare benefits.
Next, migration and skills. Firstly, migration. An increase in net inward migration tends to lead to increased jobs. Since the 1990s, the UK has seen a large increase in immigration from mainly Eastern European countries. Most of these people come to the UK to work, are of working age, and often take lower skilled jobs. They are less likely to claim benefits than the existing population. Due to the circular flow of income, immigrant spending creates jobs, and total employment increases without an increase in unemployment. This depends on how much money immigrant workers send back home. However, it also leads to lower wages, particularly for lower paid, low-skilled jobs. UK firms are able to recruit foreign workers, meaning that the supply of labor is increased and so the price equilibrium of labor is reduced. There is more competition for jobs, and UK workers who have low motivation to work and are low-skilled are most affected, as they are competing in the job market with hard-working, more skilled workers prepared to take the same jobs as them. The impact of this is only small, and middle and higher income wages are rarely affected. Secondly, skills. Economies progress over time, and as a result, higher skills are needed to work in them. In the UK 50 years ago, many jobs were available for those who couldn't read or write, but now there are few. For the UK to maintain its employment levels, it needs to increase the skills of its workforce over time. Structural unemployment is caused by a lack of, or the wrong, skills. For example, engineering companies struggle to recruit skilled workers even though there are unemployed workers in the local area. If firms will not train staff, the government has to step in to correct the market failure, but this is costly. As a result, people become long-term unemployed as their skills don't fit the jobs on offer. Migrant workers may fill these shortages if their skills fit.
What are the impacts of unemployment? Again, let's look at the economic agents. Firstly, workers. Those who are made unemployed normally have a loss of income, which usually results in a decline in their living standards. They often suffer from the stigma of being unemployed and feel degraded by the process of signing on to receive benefits to support their family. This can lead to stress, marital breakdown, suicide, and physical illness. The long-term unemployed, those unemployed for more than 12 months, often find it more difficult to get another job as they lose skills. Those who are in jobs will suffer from lower job security and will fear being made redundant. They could also see a fall in wages because the firm can easily find someone to replace them if they complain about the pay. Secondly, firms. There will tend to be a decrease in demand for their goods, but this depends on the income elasticity of demand, and so this could lead to a fall in profit. Long-term unemployment can lead to loss of skills and reduce employability of workers, so firms have a smaller pool of skilled people to employ. They can offer low wages as people will take the job anyway because they know there is a lack of jobs, so have few options. Thirdly, consumers. Consumers in areas of high unemployment lose out because local shopping centers tend to be run down and don't offer the range of shops available to those in areas of low unemployment. They suffer from less choice. The quality of goods may also decrease. The unemployed consumers lose out as they have less available to spend. However, firms may lower prices and put on sales in order to increase demand for their product. Next, the government. The reduced income results in a fall in tax revenues and higher spending on welfare payments for families with people out of work, incurring an opportunity cost as the money could be better spent elsewhere. This will result in an increase in the budget deficit. It will be likely that the government will have to raise taxation or scale back plans for public spending on public and merit goods, such as the NHS or education. They may need to increase borrowing. Society as a whole. Rising unemployment is linked to social deprivation. There is a relationship between crime and social dislocation. Examples are increased divorce rates, worsening health, and lower life expectancy. Areas of high unemployment often see a fall in demand for local goods and services, leading to a fall in income for those working in the services and sometimes further loss of jobs. It results in a loss of potential national output and represents an inefficient use of scarce resources. If people chose to leave the labor market permanently, then this will have a negative effect on long-run aggregate supply and therefore damage the economy's growth potential, so the country is unable to achieve its desired production possibility frontier. Taxpayers paying money to the unemployed is not a loss for the economy as it is a transfer payment, but the economy is affected because there is a fall in national output and the social costs of the unemployed, for example, violence and crime.
Let's look at the balance of payments next. The balance of payments is a record of all financial dealings over a period of time between economic agents of one country and all other countries. Imports are when goods/services come in, so the money goes out. Exports are when money comes in, so the goods and services go out. So, what are the components of the balance of payment? The balance of payments is made up of the current account, which records payments for the purchase and sale of goods and services, and the capital and financial account, which records flows of money associated with saving, investment, speculation, and currency stabilization. Flows of money into the country are given a positive sign and flows of money out are given a negative sign. It is important to remember that the balance of payments looks at where the money flows. Firstly, the current account. The current account itself is split into different parts. 1. Trade in goods. These are known as visible because you can physically see them. They are goods that are traded, whether raw materials or finished goods. The difference between visible exports and visible imports is known as the balance of trade. 2. Trade in services. These are services traded in or out of the country, known as invisibles. A holiday to Spain by a British family is an invisible import as money leaves the UK and goes to Spain, whilst a Japanese firm buying insurance from a City of London firm is an invisible export as money enters the UK. The balance of trade in goods and services is the balance of trade plus the balance of invisibles. 3. Income and current transfers. Wages, interest, profit, or dividends can be repatriated into the country. For example, a Polish person could send the money they make in the UK back home to Poland, or a British person could take the profits from their overseas country back to the UK. Current transfers are usually done by governments and are when they transfer money into or out of overseas organizations such as the EU. Income and current transfers can be split into primary and secondary incomes. Primary income is the result of loans of the factors of production abroad, for examples, interest, profits, and dividends, including wages sent to other countries, whilst secondary income is a range of mainly government transfers to overseas organizations, such as the EU.
Next, let's look at the current account deficits and surpluses. The current balance equals balance of trade plus balance of invisibles plus net income and current transfers. A current account surplus is where exports are greater than imports, so the current balance is positive. A current account deficit is where imports are greater than exports, so the current balance is negative. How about the government's macroeconomic objectives? Governments tend to have four main objectives: low unemployment, low and stable inflation, economic growth at a similar rate to other economies, and a balance of payment equilibrium, including current account balance. However, achieving a balance of payment equilibrium can be affected by achieving other aims. High economic growth tends to mean that the current account becomes a deficit as there are increased imports due to increased demand, and it is during times of high unemployment that the current account deficit tends to improve. Governments tend to want export-led growth, which would cause economic growth, high employment, and improves the current account balance, although it could lead to inflation. There have been frequent export initiatives, but successive UK governments have been unable to achieve this. That brings us to the interconnectedness of economies. Over time, the world economy has become increasingly interconnected. This is due to four key ways that have led to globalization. The proportion of the output of an individual economy that is traded internationally is growing. Many more people, or companies, own assets in other countries such as shares, loans, or businesses. There is increasing migration between countries. More technology being shared on a faster basis. International trade has meant countries have become more interdependent, so a change in the economic condition of one country will affect another, since the quantity they import or export changes. In theory, all current balances should add up to zero as what one country exports another imports.
Thank you for watching our video. Please like, subscribe and share. And comment below so we can clarify things for you.